Hello and welcome to another screencast. This time we'll be discussing the glandular epithelium. And so by the end of this, you should be able to describe and explain the similarities, differences between endocrine and exocrine glands. This 2 and this 3 here we'll do in a whole separate little screencast because it gets a little wordy and I want to keep it a little shorter. So we'll deal with those in another one. So the glandular epithelia here are, so glands, you can consider a gland modified epithelial cells, modified for the special function of secreting things. So the secretions are going to come from these cells, but it's a modified epithelium because not every single epithelial cell is going to be secreting something, but the glands are this subcategory of epithelial cells that are actually secreting. And then they come in 2 flavors, exocrine and endocrine, right here. So we'll talk about those in just a second. But I want to go back to this visual here where, remember that epithelium is lining or covering, right? And so here we have the lining of this is this mucous membrane. So the lining of this airway, the lining of this the trachea here, and then also of the digestive tract, that lining is an epithelium, and it's continuous kind of with the outside world. The outside covering would be the cutaneous membrane. So there's this interface here between the outside covering, the cutaneous, right, membrane, and then that folds in and will become the mucous membrane. Right? So again, so you have this outside, and then it's going to have this infolding that goes in. And that becomes, so this would be the outside, and then there's this infolding right here. So here's the infolding, here's the infolding. So this is the outside world. So this is still in connection with the outside world right there. So the cells that are lining here are epithelium. The cells that are covering here on the outside are also lining. Right? So that concept then gets applied at the microscopic level over here, right, to form what we call a gland. So again, this would be the lumen or the space here. Here's the epithelial cell here. And now these cells will dive down. There's an infolding of these cells this way. And then at the base of this, it's closed. It's not open to anything. So this blind-ended sac here, like a little cul-de-sac, has cells down here. And these cells at this area are going to be the ones that are actually doing the secreting. The cells that line the duct and then are just duct cells. So finally something is named for exactly what it's doing, right? Duct cells line the duct. So we call this space here the duct. Right? And this duct happens to be open, again, to the outside world. These secretory cells are secreting something, right? So then what we would do is we would call this part right here, we'd call this the gland. So glandular epithelium are these, there's a modified epithelium, so these are epithelial cells here. Right? These are also epithelial cells, but the modification is that these are the ones that are doing the secreting, right? Not these ones that are lining this duct, and not the ones that are open right there. So again, a gland, specialized epithelium. So you may want to pause and summarize that. So when we look at these glands, there's going to be 2 different flavors of glands. We have, pardon me, endocrine glands and exocrine glands. So the endocrine glands secrete into the bloodstream, not a duct. We'll do those a second. Let's do the one that's a little more obvious first. Exocrine glands secrete into a duct that's open to the outside world. Right? So examples of those things are sweat glands, right? Mammary glands that are producing milk, digestive enzymes. So again, all of these secretions, sweat, milk, digestive enzymes, those things will end up in the lumen that's open to the outside world. So here in this image, here are the secretions. All these dots are supposed to be the secretions, and then the arrows are showing you the direction in which those secretions are moving. Well, here's these secretions in the outside world, right, in the lumen, and then here's the duct, right, lined by cells. And those secretions came from somewhere. This is a one-way flow here. Right? So these arrows are going this way. These cells down here, these secretory cells, are the ones that produced it. So if the secretion is going into a duct that's open to the outside world, you're dealing with an exocrine gland. Exo, external, outside, right? Exit. Right? It's exiting the cell to the outside world. So I don't know, care how you remember this, just that's how I sort of remember exocrine into a duct. The secretions go into a duct that's open to the outside world. Examples, right? Mammary gland, right? The secretion is milk, and the duct then opens to the outside world here at the nipple. Right? In the skin, you have sweat glands. Those ducts open to the outside world at a pore. Right? The sebaceous glands, or the oil, sebaceous is oil glands, right? Their ducts open to where the hair is, right? So if you have really oily skin, then these sebaceous glands are overactive, and they are producing lots of oil. If you have dry skin, then they're not producing a lot of oil there. Right? So these are exocrine glands. We're going to contrast that with an endocrine gland. So the endocrine gland is shown over here. Right? So endo is within, right? Or inside of. Right? And the secretion here goes into the bloodstream. It never leaves the body. It's not open to the outside world. So the definition of an endocrine gland is that their secretions go into the bloodstream. The secretions are typically hormones, or sometimes enzymes, sometimes signal molecules. Right? So hormones, signaling molecules, kind of the same thing there. Right? The example that they give you here is the thyroid gland. So the thyroid gland is going to be producing hormones. There are two of them, T3 and T4, that are going to be produced by the thyroid gland. And they go right into the bloodstream. So if we look at the cartoon here, right, this is the endocrine cell, the endocrine gland cell. Here's an endocrine gland cell. And then the bloodstream, I'm just going to change colors here real quick. The bloodstream is in red right here. So this is supposed to be a capillary. Right? So here's the blood. Right? And then the blood is going away from this gland in this direction, out of this bloodstream. Okay? Now, assuming here that this is part of the cardiovascular system, so the blood is flowing, it looks like it's just, it's all going out. That means that, not shown on this picture, you'd have blood that's somehow leading into this capillary bed here. Right? But, so here's the bloodstream. Here are the epithelial cells. Right? So we can switch this. So this is the epithelial cell here. Right? Here's the epithelial cell here. And the secretions from these are ending up in the bloodstream here. So that's what all these light blue dots are. Right? So the hormone would be being produced by those. So endocrine gland, secretions directly into the bloodstream. Exocrine glands into a duct that's open to the outside world. Okay? So if we let me just switch here. If we go to the next image, the pancreas is a great gland to study because it has both digestive excretory tissue. So it's an exocrine gland, so some of the cells are secreting something into a duct that's open to the outside world, as well as pockets of tissue, pockets of cells that are endocrine in nature. So this is a dual role organ, right? This pancreas here. So again, here's the pancreas sitting in this curvature of the duodenum, or the small intestine. And if we zoom in on just a section of that, we're going to see the two different types of tissues. Right? So here we have glandular tissue, and these would be the cells. This would be the lumen, and the secretion would move into this duct, and then this is supposed to be the duct, and we just trace where this goes. This is going to go, right, to the pancreatic duct. That's the name of this, right? And then this is going to go and dump into right here. So here's this duct. It's going to dump into this pancreatic duct, and then that is going to open up into the lumen of the small intestine here, which is open to the outside world. So the excretory secretions are digestive enzymes. these digestive enzymes, again, leave these glandular cells here in the pancreas and move through the pancreatic duct and end up in the lumen of that small intestine. So this is one way in which our food that we eat is digested. The other part of the pancreas is the endocrine part of the pancreas, and that's shown, I'll just switch colors here real quick. That is shown here. And I'm going to notice that there's blood supply. These are blood vessels that are going into and out of the out of this tissue area here. Notice that there's no blood supply around this excretory tissue, really. So there's a blood supply here, and these cells in here are going to be the endocrine cells that are going to be secreting hormones into the bloodstream. Right? And so these hormones get secreted into the bloodstream right there, and then they go all throughout the body. Just a quick aside, some detail here, you may have heard of this, you may not, that the two different types of cells, endocrine cells in the pancreas, are the alpha cells, and they secrete a hormone called glucagon. So that's a hormone. And then the beta cells secrete a hormone, insulin, which most people, I think, have heard of. So this is a hormone as well. So these hormones are involved with regulating blood glucose levels. When your blood glucose levels are high, these beta cells will secrete insulin into the bloodstream, and then your blood glucose levels come back down. If you are low on blood glucose, then glucagon, so if your glucose is gone, then your alpha cells secrete glucagon as hormone into the bloodstream, and then your blood glucose levels will come back up. Okay? Just as a quick aside, so these are the specific names of those endocrine cells. So everything over here on this diagram is endocrine in nature, and then over here those excretory cells, not endocrine cells, the exocrine cells. What color was I using? Purple. The exocrine cells are these Achini cells or Acini cells, right? And so everything over here is, sorry, I miswrote that, is exocrine in nature. Okay? So the pancreas, a nice example of both endocrine and exocrine tissue there. Just another cartoon of the same thing. Mammary glands are mixed exocrine glands, and we'll talk about this mixed exocrine a little bit later, but I just want to show you here again. So the mammary tissue here, this is all adipose or fat in the yellow. And then all these purple lobes here, these are exocrine in nature. And then you see the ducts. So all these ducts are leading to this larger duct, right? And then leading to the outside world and the opening there at the nipple. Right? This is interesting because the cells that line this are the epithelial cells, and as you go from the duct to the lobes, the cells that change a little bit, and the different types of breast cancer are usually a cancer of a cell that is lining one of these ducts or one of the cells that's lining the lobe. So they classify the different types of breast cancer by which epithelium, which type of gland cell, and where the location of it. Right? Roughly, that's a gross oversimplification of it, but that's generally what's going on there. So these are the cells that are involved with cancer. Right? And this makes sense because a characteristic of epithelium is that they do mitosis almost all the time and rapidly, and a cancer is uncontrolled mitosis. Right? So cancer is very great mitosis, right? Uncontrolled mitosis there. Okay, so just some perspective and some understanding there. Endocrine gland, exocrine gland, right? And what those tissues are. So you should take a minute here and pause and sort of summarize this, and you should now be able to describe and explain the similarities, right, and differences between endocrine glands and exocrine glands. So the differences are relatively easy to kind of pick out, but you also do want to look for what is the same about them, and that'll help you show your understanding of what's going on. And again, I'll deal with 2 and 3 in a separate screencast. Okay? Thanks for listening, and bring any questions you have to class.